everywhere. The number of times I have had to debate with people about if Jarrett Stidham would be good enough to do something is way more than I ever predicted I would have in my life. I guess we're back. I guess we're back to talking about Jarrett Stidham somehow. All right, welcome back to the C4Q podcast. I am yet again joined by my co-host, Ethan.
What a weekend in football between the divisional games in the NFL, the conference championship look-aheads that now we have, and your Indiana Hoosiers winning the national championship. What a couple of days it's been in football.
Unbelievable. I've had to cancel so many plans in my life to watch football recently. I'm not salty about it because it was definitely worth it. But I think that some of my friends miss seeing me on the weekends. Anyways, let's get into the first matchup. Probably the one with the most things to talk about in the Broncos versus the Bills. The Broncos scrap out a win. The Bills, a heart-wrenching loss. Ethan, first takeaways. What are you thinking about first?
There's so much to digest in this game. The short of it in my mind is both teams had opportunities to win. Certainly in any overtime game, you'd expect both teams to have opportunities to win. But in this one, really, either team could have had it. We had the controversial catch or no catch interception. We had Josh Allen with the 4 turnovers in this game. Though you could argue maybe it wasn't all his fault. We now have Sean McDermott fired. We have Bo Nix's injury. I don't even know where to start, Alex. Where should we even start?
Where should we start? Was that a catch by Brandin Cooks?
I think it was pretty clearly not a catch. The argument on Twitter and everywhere else online has been if he had just dropped it after that, would it have been a catch? The answer is no. I think that's a very easy and digestible way to think about it. You got to be able to survive the ground. Yes, when we slow things down, I think Gene Steratore actually tweeted it. If we continue to look at replays at 1/100th of the speed of real time, everything looks like a catch and everything looks like possession. I do think that sometimes in soccer we see all the time with the VAR, they do it in real time with certain penalties or other reviews. I think we need that in the NFL because if you look at that in real time, it does not look like a catch. It's only when you have those screen grabs of this individual image or the next one that it looks like a catch. I think that was very clearly an interception.
I'm split because honestly, a lot of smart people around me, not including you, have said that was an interception. But my gut instinct is that it looked like he had full possession going to the ground. He was down like at the moment of contact, and then right after that he loses possession and the Broncos come away with it. At least to me, it looked like he had full possession the moment that he touched the ground. And I get that you have to be able to survive the contact with the ground, but if he had full possession from the point of the catch up to when he would have been marked down, I guess explain the rules to me where he's not down at that moment. Or do you think that he didn't have full possession when he was down?
So as I understand it in football, the only time where it's a split second, you don't have to survive either the football act or down by contact or the ground would be if you had possession in the field of play and then you reach over for the pylon and you break the plane of the end zone. At that moment, it's dead because you've already declared yourself as an active runner in possession of the ball. In that sense, he hasn't had full possession of the ball up to that point. And as a result, he does have to secure that catch and gain possession. At that point, I hear you in terms of struggling to figure out, hey, he has the ball, like in that split second, it's good. But think about if it were a sideline catch. He has the ball in that freeze frame of having his hands out, catching the ball. However, if he hits the ground and the ball just jars loose, it's going to be incomplete. To me, those are the analogous examples you can give.
I mean, I guess at that point you would say he did not have full control of the ball at any point, but at least like for me when I'm deciding what full control of the ball is, if someone else rips the ball away, that's not necessarily not surviving the fall. That's not necessarily not having full possession of the ball. I guess I'm talking myself out of it, but it seemed like he had full possession of the ball from the moment of the catch up until when he hit the ground. And then after he hit the ground, which I get your analogy of like if he hit the ground and it was a sideline catch and it immediately jarred loose, you'd say no catch. You can kind of apply the same rules here for the ball getting stripped out. I don't know. It just doesn't sit right to me because at least when I watch it, it looks like he survived the ground. So I would have marked the play dead at that point. But NFL refs seem consistent about it. Smart people seem consistent about it. So I'm just going to bite my tongue. But the fact that here we are having a like 5-minute debate on this topic shows just how fine the margins are for winning and losing in the NFL. And I mean, a coach got fired from this. Ethan, if there's anything else that you wanted to share on the catch, go for it. But we have to get into this Sean McDermott firing sooner or later.
Absolutely. I absolutely want to talk about that. The one last point I'll make about this catch thing is it's crazy that we don't know what a catch is all these years later after that Des Bryant catch, because that was really the inception point of all of this debate. At this point, it seems like it's kind of like hearsay, where it's one person says one thing, this is another person's interpretation of the rule. If it's called a catch on the field, there's a chance it just gets upheld or, the play stands or whatever the nuances are of the differences there. Like, I completely agree with you that it's a little bit convoluted, but what isn't convoluted is what the Bills have done at the helm, moving on from Sean McDermott. I think it's an interesting move. I do understand that the message sometimes ends up falling on deaf ears if it's the same thing over and over. But there's something to be said for if a guy is automatically anointed as the top free agent coach when he's fired from his team. This is a once-in-a-generation type of opportunity to work with Josh Allen, entering his prime, or you could say maybe even in his prime already. I'm not sure who's going to get this job, but this is the most fascinating opening and decision we've had this offseason. We've had a bunch.
Did you see the meme where it was the field goal uprights, and it was like if Tyler Loop made it, Tomlin gets fired. If Tyler Loop missed it, then Harbaugh gets fired. And everyone was like, oh, that's so true. I mean, Tomlin gone anyways, stepping down. But I felt like this was pretty similar with the Brandin Cooks catch, where it's like if you catch it, McDermott stays on the team. If it's an interception, McDermott's gone. The first reaction I had to this, and I feel like I have a pretty controversial take with this, is that like I don't think that Sean McDermott is like that A+ top tier coach. I think that a lot of coaches on good teams kind of get the benefit of the doubt because their records end up being good. But like if you are underperforming with the amount of talent you have on the team, I think job security for like coaches, even on winning teams, should be considered a little more insecure. I was personally a big fan of the Harbaugh firing for that reason. How much he underperformed with the Ravens, he had to go. That was the single worst coaching performance of the year, in my opinion, because even if you look at like Aaron Glenn or if you look at Brian Callahan, it's like, sure, they had nothing and they did absolutely nothing with it. Harbaugh had, in my opinion, the best roster in the NFL and brought them to a losing record. An almost losing record. So I think he has to go for that reason. I know this is a very winding point. Sean McDermott, I think, has underperformed with better teams this year. And last year, he did so much with so little. He got so much out of this Bills team that genuinely I was so incredibly impressed by. The offense, a lot of that's Joe Brady as well. But getting a top-tier offense out of Josh Allen, a good O-line, and no weapons to throw to is an incredible feat to just the coaching job that he did. And on top of that, this defense, lackluster in a lot of areas, especially in that linebacker core, constantly missing on draft picks, not having Maxwell Harrison come in and be a game-wrecking force in his rookie year. The defense ended up being okay, couldn't stop the run, but it wasn't such a liability that they couldn't compete. I was really impressed by Sean McDermott this season. I think this was the wrong season to fire him. If they had fired him 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I would have been like, that makes sense. You can't get past the Chiefs. We're not seeing enough adaptations. It makes sense. The job Brandon Beane has done has sunk this team the last couple of years. And now Sean McDermott gets fired because of it and Brandon Beane gets a promotion. It does not sit right with me, especially with the timing and what this Bills team has done. I'm sorry I took like 3 minutes on that, but Ethan, let me know your thoughts.
I think it's a really good point you're making about what you're able to do with the talent you have. Because obviously a coach only has so much say over player personnel decisions. We've seen now, apparently, John Harbaugh, or with Joe Shane now having the final say over his GM. That's a very rare feat in the NFL, to have a GM who has less final say authority than the head coach. And in this situation, it seems like a misalignment between the Pegula family and Bean and McDermott in a lot of ways, because I agree with you. If you look at the receiving core, for instance, that they had going into this game, that's not one of an AFC champion. And yes, we've seen some AFC champions or conference championship teams have depleted receiving cores, and there were injuries and all these other things. But it's not like they went into the season with this star-studded wide receiving core. This was a weakness going into the season. And the fact that it reared its ugly head is almost fitting, that's how it ends up ending in a lot of ways. Josh Allen put up 30 points against a really vaulted Denver defense with that wide receiver core. And yes, you could talk about Kincaid being a good draft pick and Dawson Knox still being a good player, and they have had some receiving help from their backfield. But the fact of the matter is their roster hasn't been good enough, in my opinion at least, to be able to truly compete for some of these pieces. And in some ways, they've actually kind of overachieved when it comes to their success. They've won double-digit games each of the last 7 seasons. They've won 11 games in every single year in the last 6. They've won 13 games in 3 of the last 6 seasons. That's a remarkable feat to do in a division that used to be absolutely ran by the Patriots. They were able to pass that torch to themselves. And at this point, it seems like it's been passed back because the Bills are not what we thought they were going to be. I think a lot of that is an organizational issue. We heard that their owner, Pegula, speak today about the Keon Coleman piece. That's not meant to be something that's opened to the public. You're not supposed to peek behind the curtain to understand draft decisions. That, to me, is indicative of poor organizational management. And I'm not going to point a finger at one individual person. I don't think that Brandin Bean specifically is at fault. I don't know if Mr. Pegula himself is necessarily at fault, but it seems like an organizational bug that they have to address. Firing the coach seems like a good step in the right direction. Keeping and retaining the GM, especially with the new coach, never really feels like a great structure to me, especially because if you look at their recent draft history, it's not like they've been setting the world on fire. If you look at their season, their success the last 7 seasons, they have been top 6 in offensive points per game. Sorry, in the last 6 seasons, they've been top 6 every single year. In defensive points, they have been top 4 in 4 of their last 7 seasons. That, to me, is more of giving Sean McDermott his flowers rather than trying to attack the job that he's done. So, to me, I agree with you. Not sure if that was the right move. I do think you need scapegoats in business at times, but not in that manner.
I did not like Pegula taking this press conference. I don't necessarily mind the press conference, but he said a lot of stuff that typically you'd see an NFL team not talk to the press about. I was just reading about this before the game. I mean, he made the decision in the locker room after the loss. This is a quote. "I did not fire Coach McDermott based off a bad officiating decision. If I take you into that locker room, I felt like we hit the proverbial playoff wall year after year. 13 seconds, missed field goal, the catch. So I just sensed in that locker room, like, where do we go from here with what we have? That was the basis for my decision." I get that, and I would agree if this team had playoff caliber talent on the team. In my opinion, it doesn't. You take Josh Allen off this team, this isn't a playoff team. This isn't something close to it. This offense would completely stall. Josh Allen has been holding up this team's production for years. And on top of that, it's like seeing the reactions from Deion Dawkins, from Josh Allen after the game, Brandon Cooks, so many people in tears talking about how much this team meant to them, the culture of the Buffalo Bills, what Sean McDermott's done to establish that culture. It became pretty clear to me, like, you know, Sean McDermott may not be the greatest X's and O's coach in the NFL. He's one of the best culture setters. This Buffalo Bills team had completely rallied around him. If you had given him more talent on this team and the same result had happened, I'd feel a little differently. But man, Brandon Beane has to look in the mirror and examine draft picks outside of Keon Coleman. I get that they came out and said, oh, the Keon Coleman pick, that wasn't really Brandon Beane's decision, which just strikes me as weird because it's like Keon Coleman's still on the team as well. So it's like, imagine the owner and the and the GM talking about you. It's something you're absolutely going to see as a already pre-written off failure. And this season sucked for Keon Coleman, so I get why they would do that. Pretty cold, man. I don't know if that was the right way to handle that, but this was the first time that Pakula had gotten in front of a camera and taken questions in 6 years. And to do it in this manner, I'm not exactly sure, but I'm glad that they didn't kind of smear McDermott's name like they would a Luka Doncic or something like that. It was just it was time. I've been looking in the comment sections of the posts that the Buffalo Bills Instagram has been making, and the comment section for the most part says you took the wrong guy and you fired him and you promoted the wrong guy. And then there's also some people who are saying it's time. I kind of lean in the you picked the wrong guy to fire team, but something did need to change, and I understand why Pagula made a big decision.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. In obviously, like I said earlier, the certain things are meant to be kept behind closed doors. The decisions you make in the draft war room should never be revealed. Right, like everyone loves to play revisionist history. Oh, I had Tom Brady as a second-round grade or whatever. Well, you didn't draft him, so it doesn't matter. All of these shoulda, woulda, couldas to me are kind of useless, and they're very detrimental because think about Keon Coleman. How do you go to work next year, right? How are you supposed to just put on a smile and be like, yep, this is good. I've been inactive when I've been healthy this year, and now it's my owner, who's effectively my boss, is now smearing my name all over the national media, and it's making its rounds. Let's talk the game, though, Alex. In this game specifically, Josh Allen, 4 turnovers. I don't think that it's all on him because he was asked to do so much, but I don't think he can be completely exonerated of any guilt. He certainly did not play the most perfect game possible, but I also, and we could talk about the personnel around him, but I thought that his mistakes cost them. I don't know if they wouldn't have gotten to this point without him, so obviously you are okay going and falling on your sword, but what did you see in this game that stood out?
Top to bottom, so far in my playoff bracket, I only have one game wrong, which was that I really did think that the Bills were going to win this game. I didn't think the Broncos could do it, but like you said, I think the biggest single takeaway is Josh Allen's turnovers specifically. If Josh Allen doesn't fumble at the end of the first half there, and if the Broncos don't get those 3 extra points, instead of that heroic 55-second drive at the end of the fourth being for a game-tying field goal, it's for the win. And that, obviously it's not as one-to-one as that. People are going to switch up their play calling. One defensive coordinator can go into prevent defense earlier. It becomes this, that, and the other thing. That being said, those turnovers cost him, and he did just genuinely have a bad game. I want to give Josh Allen obviously a lot of credit. He's been incredible all season long. He was the main reason the Bills lost this game. He was asked to do a lot, and he didn't perform up to that billing. I'd say that this Denver defense is legit, and shout out to the Denver offense, man. I was low on RJ Harvey through the playoffs. I said that I didn't think that RJ Harvey could exploit this Bills defense. I was proven wrong. RJ Harvey had a pretty good game. Put up 30 points, so it's like the offense overall was clicking. It just kind of comes down to this Broncos team doesn't have the quarterback, in my opinion, not a Josh Allen-esque quarterback, but is just a much more talented roster, and this Bills roster is a much less talented roster, but has that quarterback. So, if that quarterback who's the one dragging you to the situation doesn't perform like an MVP every night, this is what can happen. And it's sad because when the Bills have gone out in the playoffs in the past, it usually hasn't been because of Josh Allen's performance, but this Josh Allen performance is what got his coach fired, and that's what causes major shift in the guard, and it's disappointing. It's disappointing to say the least. What did you see out there, Ethan?
I was surprised by the way this game went. Like, you look at the penalties, there were triple the number of penalty yards for Buffalo than Denver. Rushing as well, over double the rush yards, 183-70. We were talking about going into this game, the Bills' rush defense isn't good. Maybe Harvey can exploit it. Maybe Bo Nix can exploit it. And we were proven wrong because they had 70 rush yards on 22 attempts. It's 3.2 rush yards per attempt. You actually credit the Bills' run defense there. I thought the Broncos could have leaned into their run game a little bit more and potentially taken advantage more. Red zone, the Bills were better in the red zone. Time of possession, they had over 11 more minutes of possession than the Broncos did. Total yards, they had 100 more yards. Third down, they were 67% on converting. This is a game you don't expect to lose, and that's why the big stat here is 5 turnovers to 1. That is really the deal breaker here. Everything else points to a Bills victory, and probably a resounding one at that, because like I said, if you have that many more rush yards and time of possession and third down conversion rates, you don't expect to lose this game. To me, not to bury Josh Allen, but it does seem like this, in a lot of ways, falls on his shoulders. The ripple effect is always cruel in the NFL and just in business in general. But I'm very excited to see how this Broncos team does, because I agree with you. It seemed like this roster had a really good day on Saturday afternoon, and they're going to have a really big day in Denver in this upcoming Sunday, which we'll obviously touch on. But let's move right along to this Niners and Seahawks game. Alex, what did you see in this one?
A spanking. That was pretty brutal. I know that we thought that this 49ers game was going to be pretty close, but I mean, just top to bottom, the Seahawks took care of business. It honestly did shift how I feel about the Seahawks team. I thought that Robert Saleh would have a better defensive game plan against them than he obviously did. Just about everything went wrong for this for the 49ers. They almost had to do nothing. Sam Darnold, I mean, had 12 pass attempts, so it's not like he came out and lit the world on fire. The 49ers just shot themselves in the foot over and over and over again and couldn't find their way out, not to mention just how beat up this team is yet again. I mean, Jake Tonjes being the leading receiver for this team is, I think, a good way to remember what happened to this team this year. Ethan?
I think even further, Brock Purdy being their leading rusher. Like, it's just... You're just decimated by injury. Like,
oh man,
I know we're laughing, but like, I feel so bad for them in a lot of ways too, because this team has all of the makings of a Super Bowl contender, and obviously going into this postseason, they did not have all their guys healthy. And shout out to Kyle Shanahan and Robert Saleh and the rest of this team. They obviously have a really good coaching staff, and the fact that they were able to get here, I think, is pretty impressive. But it's funny, the NFC West ran into the NFC West, right? But, you look at the receivers. There were 4 guys in double digits for receiving yards. Jake Tonjes and Kyle Juszczyk were 2 of them, guys you wouldn't expect to be on that list. It almost feels reminiscent of that Eagles-Niners NFC Championship game where the Niners had 2 quarterbacks that couldn't throw the ball forward because of injuries. Like, that's how decimated they were. They had linebackers playing who weren't playing starting roles on NFL teams to start the year. Like, it's an incredible job that they came to this game. But that kick return, man, what an electrifying start to this game. Rashid Shaheed, what a great trade for Seattle. And Lumen Field, that place gets absolutely buzzing whenever they have a great team. I'm so excited to see them get to play again on Sunday. This team is really fun to watch when they're rolling. Obviously, the Niners didn't give them a great shot at potential defeat this past Saturday, but I'm really excited to get to see Mike McDonald and the rest of this team perform in a really fun NFC Championship game that obviously we'll preview in a little bit.
I mean, yeah, bold butterfly effect take. It's like if they don't trade for Rashid Shaheed, they probably don't beat the Rams in the last time that they played. So they probably don't have the 1 seed. So they probably, it just keeps going. Rashid has been so impactful. I get shivers watching. Have you seen any of the phone, someone recorded it on their phone, recordings from the stand of Rashid taking it to the house? That registered as a minor earthquake in Seattle. It was so damn loud. That's the beauty of sports, man. That initial return was freaking awesome. But yeah, I mean, coming into this game, we talked about how we didn't think that the 49ers could stop the run, but maybe Robert Saleh could just, rub his bald head and come up with something beautiful and ingenious at the way that he does, and go like this, and then whoosh, magic in front of him. 175 rushing yards for the Seahawks on 5.3 per carry on 33 carries and 3 touchdowns. I would say that didn't really happen. So I guess this game was every point we had about how the 49ers could lose it just came true. So I guess nothing really unexpected happened, but to the degree to which it did happen was a bit shocking.
Yeah, the point actually that I think is fascinating as we'll look ahead is that running game for Seattle is going to look a whole lot different without Zach Charbonnet. I think they're going to have to, I know Velus Jones is on their roster, and they've used Shaheed in the run game, and maybe Darnold runs a little bit more in the future. But this run game is going to be a lot different. Some people on Twitter were saying that the run game now improves because K9 actually is going to get an opportunity to run the ball at the goal line and be a power back, which he most certainly is capable of doing. Hopefully Zach Charbonnet recovers quickly and he's ready for the offseason workouts, because obviously that's a really devastating injury for the guy going into the NFC Championship game. But I think that they can be okay. I don't think they need a ton of production behind Kenneth Walker. I think he's a super capable back. But that is going to leave a mark on this team moving forwards. Receiving-wise, too, they didn't have a whole lot of offense. That's the funny part. The pass game was actually a lot lesser than the run game. Kenneth Walker had more pass yards than the Seahawks team, if you include sacks. So that's not an indictment on Darnold. He wasn't really asked to do much because he didn't have to do much. But, Smith and Jigba only had 19 receiving yards, and after that, it was Cooper Kupp, Jake Bobo. Those are the only guys catching passes. They're going to need more production out of those receivers against the Rams, which we'll save for that preview. But this Seahawks team didn't really have to do anything. After that opening kickoff, I mean, you could play revisionist history, but they could have just taken kneels from a final score standpoint. Obviously, that's a silly point, but it's crazy to think that San Fran didn't match that opening kickoff point total for the rest of the game. But shout out to Seattle. They're so much fun when their football team is elite, and clearly they're one of the best units in football.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about how they match up versus the Rams, because I will say my opinion on the Seahawks-Rams is somewhat changed. Not dramatically changed, but this is definitely something that's going to make me reconsider how I feel about the Rams versus the Seahawks in this next round. But let's move on to... I'll let you go first because I have so many thoughts. I'm just going to go on a ramble. I want to make sure that you get your points out so I could retaliate. Patriots versus Texans. What a messy, sloppy, turnover-driven game. I mean, I'm going to ask the first question before we get into, my Patriots. There has been so much criticism pointed at CJ Stroud. Ethan, do you think he's the right guy for this Texans team? Should the Texans start looking elsewhere at the QB position? Tell me how much of this loss is on CJ Stroud.
I mean, specifically this game, a lot of it's on his back, right? When you have a defense as superior as that Houston one is, fall this flat. I mean, the 28 points that they gave up, obviously the defense didn't allow all those points themselves because CJ Stroud actually allowed some of the points with his arm. It's hard not to blame him and not to have him be the focal point of this loss. I think it's a little bit extreme to say that we have to just move on from him from this game, but it's something almost unprecedented to have your quarterback, especially given all the praise that the media and the greater public has given him over the years, call for his neck like mid-game. Halftime, we had I think it was Marcus Spears is like, do we bench him for Davis Mills? And I don't know what the right call is, honestly, because that's such an unprecedented situation to be like, do we put in a guy who has some experience? He's been a starter before for us. He's been good for us this season. Do we put him in just because he's new and maybe he gives us a spark? There's no right or wrong answer there. That's why D'Amico Ryans is paid the amount of money he's paid to make hard decisions like that. You could say it's the wrong decision because they lost. It could have been a 30-point loss if they put Davis Mills in. Who knows? That being said, CJ Stroud, this loss, maybe not entirely, but it mainly falls on him. That offensive line didn't quite do what they had hoped maybe they do, but CJ Stroud certainly did not do that team any favors. I think if he had instead of how many? It was 4 interceptions that he had. Was it 5 total turnovers? Oh man.
Yeah, 4 interceptions.
No, Woody Marks had one of the 5 turnovers, so it was only 4 for Stroud. But if he has one of those interceptions not be, like let's say the pick 6 doesn't happen, there's a chance they win this game, and that's a pretty damning statement for him. I don't think it entirely falls on his shoulders. To me, this run game couldn't get going. That's a little bit of a product of the offensive line. A lot of credit to the Patriots defense, and the Patriots were ready for this game. Absolutely. Got to give them their flowers. But yes, I think to me the biggest story here is CJ Stroud did not live up to the billing. I feel pretty good about my Bryce Young over CJ Stroud take that I've continued to stand over for a while. I don't think Bryce Young has lit the world on fire, but I do think that that's something that looks better as it's aged. But the Patriots, unfortunately, seem to have conjured whatever they need to be able to win these games. They look good, and they're expected to win the AFC Championship for good reason.
I'm really happy that you touched on the Patriots defense because that's what won this game for the Patriots. I mean, I talked a lot about why I thought this team was going to go so far in the playoffs, and a huge factor in that was getting Milton Williams back. This team is currently undefeated when both Christian Gonzalez and Milton Williams plays, which is pretty insane. I mean, they were both injured for stretches of the season, so it's kind of nitpicky, but also, in my opinion, insane. Milton Williams, I did not expect him to have this impact on the run defense. I think it's both Milton Williams and Robert Spillane being healthy, but having them back has completely shifted the identity of this team back to early season Patriots, because early season Patriots were not giving up anything on the ground. The run game was completely locked down for the first, dozen weeks of the season. Then the injuries kind of piled up, and like I said, the Patriots allowed the most rushing yards in week 15, 16, and 17 of the regular season. So I came into this postseason terrified that Woody Marks was going to be able to run all over us, that, we would have a hard time shutting down a Marion Hampton if he played. And that has been the opposite of the case. The Patriots run defense is the highest graded run defense in this postseason by over 10 on PFF, and has the highest overall graded defense in the league. That being said, they also have the 4th lowest ranked passing offense, just graded out wise. And I think that it's pretty scary how much the identity of this team has had to shift in the postseason. They're getting the job done, but man, going into the next week, this Patriots defense is stout. They showed that versus the Texans, able to force so many turnovers. But damn, man, Drake May in this performance. I'm not trying to get down on my glorious king, my glorious king. But 2 fumbles, 1 lost versus the Chargers. 4 fumbles versus the Texans. And so many of them didn't need to happen, where it was just Drake May being uncharacteristically careless with the ball. Part of what made Drake May's season this year so special was how careful he was with the ball and how few rookie-esque mistakes he made, turning the ball over when he didn't need to, fumbling when he didn't need to, backing up into someone that has their arm up like this and swiping down. He just generally didn't do that. I think in the postseason, he has just kind of found this, I don't even know what to call it, this sort of more hero ball mentality where, like, even if he feels the pressure on him, he's going to try and make that throw. And I am praying that Josh McDaniels can sit him down and say, Drake, calm down. I've been here before. The rest of us have been here before. We can do this, but you have to stop fumbling the ball. This Broncos defense next week and we're going to get into that preview in just a second, but I am scared to death based off this performance that Drake May is going to fumble the ball again. He's fumbled the ball at least 2 times every game of the postseason so far. That being said, it is the Houston Texans defense. I get it. But we should have game planned against this. We knew, at least I knew, that Will Campbell and Jared Wilson were not going to hold up against Danielle Hunter. Danielle Hunter had breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a down payment on that offensive line. He got everything he wanted out of those two. It was frustrating to watch. I think in the planning and coaching for this game, it had to be like, yeah, they're going to get pressure on you, Drake. Just don't turn the ball over. We have to win the turnover battle. And they only won the turnover battle because CJ Stroud came out and threw up on his shoes for 4 consecutive quarters. So was this win perfect? No. Did all of the weaknesses of this Texans team completely blow up and cause them to lose this game? Yes. Did this game make me feel any more or less confident in the Patriots' future? No. I feel about the same about the Patriots, but in different ways now. I'm nervous, though, because I don't know to what extent this new side of Drake May is going to continue.
It's a great point about the identity shifting, and I think that's what makes a really good team, to be honest, as well. A team that can morph their identity, win in a multiplicity of ways. That's what, not to get too much into the Patriots specifically, but that's what made the dynastical run with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick so incredible, because they went into this shape-shifting mode of, we're going to beat you in the trenches, and then we're going to beat you on the outside with skill position guys, and we're going to beat you with Tom Brady, and we're going to beat you running the ball down your throats. Like, they were able to win games in so many different ways. And looking at the team now, it seems like they've somewhat assumed that identity in some ways, right? They can win in a ground and pound type of match. They can win in a track meet, it seems. They haven't had that in the playoffs yet, but it seems like they can do that. They can beat you on the outside. Obviously, Drake May, despite the shortcomings you're talking about, he had a pretty brilliant couple of highlights. The throw to Kayshon Boutte was otherworldly. They were almost dead in the water at that point in terms of the stagnant offense, and it felt like Houston was starting to gain momentum. And then that throw absolutely put the game on ice. He deserves all the credit in the world for that. That is an elite level throw. Like, not that many guys on the planet can make that. Boutte also, a spectacular catch, especially considering the conditions.
Oh, yeah. But, I mean, that catch, I felt a little surprised. Usually, I needed a cigarette after that. Usually, I don't know. I talk for a while before witnessing something that pleasurable. That was unbelievable. The slow motion snow coming down, the epic music playing in the background, some of the cinematography coming out of that throw and catch is just utterly insane. Not to mention Stephon Diggs' incredible touchdown catch. Also incredible throw by May there. So I'm not trying to say that Drake May is still like dead in the water. We just didn't win this game because of him. When I was hoping and expecting that this Patriots offense could carry them to the Super Bowl, that just hasn't necessarily been the case. Yeah, and to that point, the next piece I was going to say is guys like Nick Bonito are going to potentially terrorize the left side of that offensive line. It's not great when the best performance your rookie left tackle does is recovering 2 fumbles. That's not amazing. Like, yes, they were huge plays, and actually the first one that he recovered, I was like, how did the Texans not get on this? Maybe, I think it was the second one in the second half. It just, like, yes, Drake May, his ball security absolutely has to be better, and that is a rookie caliber mistake, as you said, Alex. That being said, though, his highs were able to outweigh the lows, and to me, the matchup is going to be, can this I'll save it, I guess, for the next piece, but with the Patriots specifically, can this Patriots offensive line hold up enough where they can give Drake May enough time to operate, but also make him comfortable in the pocket? Because if he starts getting in his own head, we've not seen Drake May have to overcome a lot of mental adversity this season. And if the first time you do it is in Mile High in the AFC Championship game, it's not going to be the ideal scenario. Not saying he's not built for it. I actually think he might be built for it. But that's a scary place to have to be faced with demons. I entirely agree with it. We'll talk more about the Patriots in a second because it's my favorite thing to do. But Bears versus Rams. There's a lot to go over in this game. I'm going to let you have the floor first, Ethan. What kind of struck you first from this game?
The Bears defense stepped up. That to me is the big thing. Like, the Bears defense did not seem like they could hang. And then they did hang. And they did that and then some. I was really impressed with their defense. They were able to not shut down the rush game, but only 3.6 yards per carry, I think, is wildly impressive. 5 for 16 on third down allowed. That's another feather in their cap. I mean, they had more passing yards than the Rams, more total yards. They controlled time of possession. They got 3 more turnovers than the Rams. I think the Bears should feel pretty good about this from a defensive standpoint. Sorry. The three turnovers actually on the Bears. My apologies. Those are the Caleb interceptions. The piece that I think the Bears have to work on, which maybe is better for them, is their offense didn't execute in the big moments other than that crazy play to Cole Kmet in the back of the end zone, which, yeah, you take it away.
I mean, in terms of what struck me first, it was like, holy crap, what a game. Holy crap, what a singular throw by Caleb Williams. That was one of the greatest plays I've ever seen. And then I'm like, the Bears should have won this. Are we kidding ourselves? The Bears defense just locked down and allowed, in overtime, 20 points to debatably the best offense in the NFL with probably the MVP. How did the Bears lose this? And then I reflect on the game and I go, oh yeah, they yet again could not convert a 4th down conversion. If Ben Johnson just takes the field goals, the Bears win this by multiple scores. It was so frustrating. And I do think Ben Johnson's a genius, don't get me wrong. But in the postseason, this Bears team could not convert the 4th down, and they left so many points on the board both versus the Packers and versus the Rams. It doesn't make sense to me why Ben Johnson's so hung up on this. I get that it's part of his identity, but in 2024, the Detroit Lions had the 4th best 4th down conversion percentage. They converted 68.57% of their conversions on 4th down. Now we look at 2025. How are the Bears doing? They are 23rd. They are 23rd. They are the lowest ranked team with a winning record on this list. They converted almost none of their 4th downs, around 60%. It was so frustrating to see Ben Johnson not adapt, and especially in the midseason. I don't know, man. It wasn't 60%. It's 48.78% that they converted this year. It's so frustrating seeing Ben Johnson kind of be a little stuck in his ways in a playoff game in this way, because I get that that's the identity that you want to establish. Right now, the personnel's just not there to convert it. Caleb Williams is a unreliable quarterback at times and can miss those easy dink and dunk passes. Kyle Monangai, he's a rookie. He's that power rusher that you want, but he's not Jahmyr Gibbs and he's not David Montgomery either. So, let's pivot to something else if this isn't reliable. If Ben Johnson doesn't do as bad of a job as he did coaching this game, the Bears win, and they should have won. They locked down the Rams, and it has changed how I feel about the Rams as well.
One point, actually, that we haven't brought up so far that I find fascinating, and to your point, Alex, the 4th and 1 was really tough not getting it in the first half, and the 4th and goal towards the end of the game that they got stopped at the 2-yard line. Like, really, really catastrophic pieces. But do you go for 2 there? And I'll make the argument for yes. Colston Loveland out of the game. Your defense is playing well, but the Rams are still the Rams. You just scored almost half the points in the game. They had 10, and they scored 6 on that Cole Kmet touchdown in the corner of the end zone. You scored almost half your points on this unbelievable play. Do you trust your offense to be able to outcompete the Rams and their Super Bowl tutelage? To me, that's the time where you go for 2. I know you're at home, and I know the weather's playing into your hand and all these things, but between the injuries in the game and just the way the game was going, it felt like that was his time to call his last timeout and go for 2. Especially given the fact that they were aggressive all game. It seems, I'm not going to say inexplicable, but it seems a little bit confusing and almost backwards not to go for 2 after going for 4th down 6 times in the game. To me, that's an example of, I think Ben Johnson plays to win the game. He does not play not to lose in most scenarios. I think there he was playing not to lose, and I actually think that's a huge mistake. I understand the criticism, if you don't get it, of you're at home and bare weather and the momentum that you've gained and all this stuff, but I think it's the right play to go for 2. Analytically, you expect to have a play in that conversion that's going to convert about 50%, hopefully more than 50%, because you have something there in overtime. I don't think the Bears have a 50% chance to win that game, given the way the game was going, given the way, their best receiver, Colston Loveland, out with a concussion. And maybe they didn't know he was out at the time, but it felt like that was an opportunity for Ben Johnson to do the Ben Johnson thing, and he did not do it.
I would agree. Kind of. Caleb Williams is a late game performer. I mean, he's shown up clutch again and again and again. So I understand why you'd believe, yeah, Caleb can just turn a switch and he can show up in OT. We didn't see it throughout the game. And I understand that you want to be confident in your guy. I agree with you that, on paper, you're not supposed to compete with this team. Colston Loveland's out. Get that win. Go for it on 2. That being said, what I was just saying about going for it on 4th, they have been so inefficient in the postseason this year going for it on 4th. I mean, damn, they only fell behind to the Packers because they could not convert for it on 4th. So I get wanting to shy away from that, but the timing of it's weird. Where over and over and over again, you could have gotten 1, 2, 3 scores up. They left 9 points on the board in the first half off of 4th downs not converting that they could have been field goals. And now you decide to kind of slow up? It doesn't make perfect sense to me. I'm glad that it went to OT just from a football fan perspective, but I think I agree with you. I understand the decision, but if I were in those shoes, I probably would have gone for 2 and just, see what happens. Well, that is the divisional round, unless you have anything else to add to Bears versus Rams. Let's get into these conference championships. We already talked a bit about Pats versus Broncos. Ethan, give me your thoughts. I'm curious what you think because obviously I am quite biased.
I have a lot of emotions from a personal standpoint about this, but from seemingly an X's and O's standpoint, I think it's going to be a much better game than people anticipate. A lot of folks are counting out the Broncos because of the Bo Nix injury, which, let us just say, absolutely devastating. What a warrior to finish that game with a broken ankle. I guess the adrenal rush you get is just so massive that he doesn't feel it until the end, or he knows it, but he doesn't need to limp or whatever. I know Tracy Wolfson tweeted out that, hey, he clearly wasn't putting weight on that leg or knee or ankle in the post-game interview, but what a warrior to be able to will his team to victory there. That being said, I actually am more optimistic on the Broncos than I think most people are. Bo Nix was asked to do things for that team, but I don't think he was asked to do too many crazy pieces, which does play into Sean Payton's hand of he can reduce the playbook as much as he wants. He can try to dink and dump a little bit with JARRETT Stidham. The piece on Stidham that I find very interesting, I mean, there are so many pieces that are interesting. Gets drafted by the Patriots, backs up Tom Brady. The Patriots had chances maybe to retain him, and then he goes to the Raiders and starts 3 games for them and then goes to the Broncos, and he re-signed this past offseason for a pretty hefty $12 million backup deal over 2 years. That's a pretty premium amount to pay for a guy who's only had, up to that point, 3 career NFL starts. I have a lot more optimism in him being able to maybe not win this game on his shoulders, but to be able to compete in this game than I think a lot of others do. I think Sean Payton's a pretty brilliant play caller and game planner and all of that. I think this Broncos defense is really good. They're better than I thought they were. I thought that the Riley Moss component of being a targeted cornerback 2 was going to be exposed a little bit more. I don't think he's played that poorly this postseason. I guess it's been just 1 game against the Bills, who don't really have a wide receiver 2, so maybe that's an element of it as well. But I'm a lot more optimistic in this Broncos team being able to win than I thought I'd be. Obviously, the Patriots are favorites. They deserve to be favorites. They've played really well this postseason. But I think it's going to be more of an uphill climb than folks anticipate. And I do think this will be the toughest test the Patriots have faced all season from a pressure and X's and O's standpoint.
I think the Texans game was a better showing of what the Patriots can do. That being said, this Jarrett Stidham conversation has unlocked so many hidden memories I forgot about. There was a stretch where Mac Jones was not performing well, and there was a huge group of Patriots fans that were like, this is what Jarrett Stidham did in college. This is what Jarrett Stidham did here. Look at the throwing motion on Jarrett Stidham. So many people were excited for him. And then he played, and he was super mediocre, to be honest. But there's so many Patriots fans that were screaming, come on, give Stid the kid. There's one picture of Jarrett. I don't know if you've seen it. There's one picture of Jarrett Stidham sitting on a throne with a football in his hand. He's got a crown on, and he's like smiling. Like, I'll put the picture up. That was everywhere. That was absolutely everywhere on Patriots social media for months. And all of a sudden, I start seeing that picture again everywhere. The number of times I have had to debate with people about if Jarrett Stidham would be good enough to do something is way more than I ever predicted I would have in my life. I guess we're back. I guess we're back to talking about Jarrett Stidham somehow. I don't think he's all that. He was pretty mediocre on the Patriots. But like you said, Sean Payton is good at simplifying offenses. If Jarrett Stidham is as good in play action as Bo Nix is, or can even be a part of that and is good at scrambling, throwing on the run, Sean Payton can make something happen. In general, I'm not that scared of this Broncos offense, but I do think that Bo Nix is a smaller factor than people are giving it credit for. Obviously, he's very important to this team, but this Broncos team absolutely has the ability to compete with this Patriots team, in my opinion. Especially given what we just saw out of the Patriots in the last game. Once again, 4 fumbles by Drake May. Nick Bonito being on that side with Will Campbell, who had a pass blocking grade of, I think, 16 versus the Texans. That's a matchup I'm very scared about. And like we were talking about in the Bills-Broncos game, sometimes the margins are so slim that one turnover, that one fumble that doesn't get recovered can decide a game. I'm scared we could see another fumble-tastic performance and this Broncos defense wills their way to a Super Bowl appearance. That wouldn't shock me as much as I think it would shock the masses. That being said, I still do have the Patriots, obviously. This Patriots defense, I think, is so capable of having Jarrett Stidham see ghosts, shutting down RJ Harvey, not seeing this offense be able to do anything. We just need to limit the turnovers. I do think that the turnover battle will once again decide this game, similar to how it did in the Patriots-Texans. Maybe not to the same volume of turnovers, but it's going to be the single most important factor. Still taking the Pats, but it's going to be a really good matchup.
I think also third down, to me, is a big piece in these really high-profile, consequential playoff games. Because on third down, if you convert 50 or 60%, you're probably going to win that game versus if you're 30s, 40s. It's really hard to overcome that because you don't have sustained drives. Your defense doesn't get the rest it needs. And I think this Patriots team is in really, really good shape. But playing at altitude is tough. Like, that's an element that I think Denver's a tough place to play just from the standpoint of those fans are really rowdy for their football team. They have the metal bleachers and everyone's banging their feet. I was there for a regular season game a few years ago, and it was loud, and it was like an October afternoon against a below 500 team. I won't say the opponent, but like this atmosphere the Patriots are going into, I believe to be an underrated component here. Yes, the Bills didn't necessarily struggle because of the Mile High advantage. And I'm not going to say the Patriots will struggle, but I do think that's a component that as you add in the Bo Nix versus Jarrett Stidham thing, it's also the Patriots playing at home the last 2 games versus on the road. That's another factor to consider. How many points is that worth? I'm not sure, if any, but it is something to consider when you're talking about these margins, that if the Patriots are to win by, let's say, a field goal, maybe it becomes a 1 or 2 point game as a result of not being at home or what have you. But it's not meant to be that cold. I think it's going to be maybe like 30s in Denver on Sunday, so it'll be colder. Maybe it's 20s. But I mean, New England's a cold place too. I don't think that necessarily is a huge advantage. It's more so the altitude and the atmosphere. But I'm really excited for this matchup. I do think that the left side of the Patriots offensive line against Nick Bonito and the rest of that defensive line is going to be a gripping matchup and one that we're going to have to circle.
Absolutely. There is one study that has been done on home field advantage. And I just want to agree with you, first of all, that the home field advantage for the Broncos is massive. There was a research paper in 2017, an analysis called the Annals of Applied Statistics, found that in the randomness of sports article, found that a home field advantage is consistently there for Colorado teams, always at the top of every sport. They found that sport by sport, home field advantage waivers, or it's more effective in other sports than in certain other sports. I'm mixing my words. Basically, basketball has the biggest home field advantage. Then there's the NFL. Then there's the NHL. Then there's the MLB. At the top of home field advantage for every sport, the Nuggets have the biggest home field advantage for any team in basketball. And then the Broncos have the biggest home field advantage for any team in the NFL. It's a really interesting paper. I've read it before. I'm just looking at the graph right now. The Broncos consistently do have a say in how things go because of the altitude. You can never discount what a home field advantage is for the Broncos during the playoffs, because it really is a factor. So once again, this being a turnover-prone game with the Broncos having the best home field advantage in football, those two factors don't necessarily sit right with me. I'm not going to say that the Patriots are going to lose, but I'm just saying even if the media pundits disagree, this game is going to be somewhat close. Sorry for my ramble. Let's move on to this Rams-Seahawks game, the third matchup between these two teams, with two classics already in the book. Ethan, did the Seahawks and Rams performances this last week change how you think this matchup will go?
That's such a great question, because I don't think that it did, but it probably should. It probably should, and it hasn't, because I
It's
guess
a good question, man.
no,
I
it's a
don't
great
even
question.
have a
I think
fully
Seattle
solidified
was
answer.
faced with a team who was decimated by injuries. Obviously, they were playing at home, which is a big advantage. And I think furthermore, the Rams were playing in a tough Chicago environment against a team that played above their billing in a lot of ways. It does change a little bit. Like I think that the Rams should be underdogs on the road, but to me, these are two very evenly matched teams on paper. So I guess to answer your question, it probably should change my mentality. I still am going to take the Rams in this game, even though I feel like it's kind of heart over head in terms of how I think about it. It feels like Seattle is probably a better team, but I'm going to still take the Rams because of their championship pedigree that they had a couple of years ago. I think with the championship pedigree, it does add an element of their experience. They've been there before. I have some stats. You mind if I pull out some stats from the two matchups? So the difference between the two, turnovers, 7-1 in favor of the Rams. That to me is a pretty staggering number. The other piece that I found to be kind of interesting was the time of possession actually favored the underdog the loser in both these games. Seattle in the first game, they lose by 2 points, and they have over 15 more minutes of time of possession. And the Seahawks, they win by 1 point. The Rams lose by 1 point in the second game, and they have over 16 minutes time of possession more than Seattle. So very interesting differences there between the two. The other piece that I think is, I guess maybe not as notable, but the third downs. LA has been poor at converting third downs. In the first game, they were 2 for 11. Second game, 8 for 20. So that's going to be a key down that Seattle is going to be able to hopefully exploit if you're a Seattle fan. But it's going to be such an awesome matchup to have this game played a third time.
100%. I agree with you that I think Seattle is a quote-unquote better team. So, like, logically, I should go Seattle. I also think that football is such a remarkably simple game sometimes. Like, it's so complicated that we can make a whole podcast dissecting it and disagreeing and debating. But then it's also like, if you turn the ball over, you lose. It's pretty remarkably simple. CJ Stroud has 4 turnovers. Texans lose. Josh Allen throws 4 turnovers. Bills lose. Or not throw, but it has 4 turnovers. Bills lose. Sam Darnold has 4 turnovers. Somehow the Seahawks win. That's an anomaly. That turnover margin, I think, is so large that I still give the edge to the Rams, especially with Zach Charbonnet being out now, because you're going to be forced to throw the ball a little bit more than you previously would have. If you can limit the turnovers as the Seattle Seahawks, then, I think that you can win this game. That being said, the Rams just forced 3 turnovers out of the Chicago Bears and won a really close one where if they hadn't forced those turnovers, they absolutely would not have won. So I'm still going to go with the Rams. I think that their defense is able to force more turnovers out of. I think the Rams just overall win the turnover battle, and that'll be what decides this.
Yeah, I mean, to me in the playoffs, when the game shrinks a little bit and it's much more matchup dependent, it comes down to third down, red zone, turnovers. In no specific order, those to me are the big ones. I think penalties also matter a lot. Fourth down conversions are big. Time of possession matters a lot. Home field. But to me, as you just said eloquently, Alex, turnovers clearly favoring the Rams in this game. I wouldn't be shocked if Seattle ended up creating more takeaways than the Rams because they've been good at that. That being said, if history does us any justice, it seems like Sam Darnold is likely due for more turnovers than Matt Stafford. And maybe part of that's experience. Maybe that's how they've both been in big moments. I believe the Rams will win this game on the backs of Matthew Stafford. I expect him to have a good game. In the 2 games that they've played, he's been pretty good. The first game, he was quieter. He only had 130 yards, 2 touchdowns, and just over 50% completion. In the second game, closer to 60% completion, but then 457 yards, 3 touchdowns. And in all of these games, he finished with 0 turnovers. That, to me, is a big piece. Matt Stafford's had those blow-up games where he's had, a trifecta of turnovers. He can't afford to do that against the Seattle defense, but if he's able to avoid that and the Rams are able to take the ball away from Darnold, I do think they can come out victorious and go back to the Super Bowl. This roster clearly is good enough to do it, though the Chicago Bears showing seemingly is a knock on the Rams. To me, it's more about the way that game went rather than potentially a flaw of the Rams. I'm going to stick with the Rams and say they make the Super Bowl.
Absolutely. I don't think that's a bad takeaway. Just based on the takeaway argument that we were making, including the playoffs, Houston actually becomes the leading takeaway per game leader of the NFL this season, averaging 1.8 takeaways per game. The Rams and the Seattle Seahawks are both tied at 1.6 takeaways per game. Chicago falls to 3rd when they were previously number 1 in this category because they forced basically no turnovers in the last 2 games, none versus the Rams, and I believe 1 versus the Packers. So I'm going to rely on history. I'm just going to say that Sam Darnold is going to throw more interceptions than Matt Stafford this game. I guess that's my incredibly not hot take. Moving on to, I have to acknowledge your sweatshirt, Ethan. Indiana with an absolutely insane national championship win. We're going to journey over into college football ever so briefly. I don't have too much to say, but I know that your mind is buzzing with how incredible this Indiana season was. Thoughts, takeaways on this national championship?
It's hard to put into words thinking about Indiana being a national championship team for the landscape of college football, but I'll focus on this individual team. They had no 5-star recruits. They did well in the transfer portal, but it wasn't like they lit the world on fire from that standpoint. Kern Signetti is one of the greatest coaches we've seen, and this season was one of the greatest coaching performances we've seen in a very long time. Being 16-0 is very, very impressive, and yes, the LSU team from 2019 or 20 or whatever year it is, They didn't have the opportunity to play in 16 games. It's up there for me with those types of undefeated runs. They're really spectacular within the sport of football, more specifically college football. This team was awesome. Their offensive line dominated. Their, maybe not Miami specifically because their D-line was really good on Monday night, but their defensive line was awesome. Their secondary, very physical. They were really good in coverage. They have a lot of NFL players on this team. I'm really excited to see how many guys get drafted from this IU squad, but it's really exciting getting to see Fernando Mendoza link up with all of the receivers and guys who played at JMU, guys who came from the transfer portal. Charlie Becker, one of the few holdovers from that previous Indiana regime. But this team, in terms of the landscape of college football, it changes everything. It really does, because now you have this expectation potentially that if you can't win, maybe not at all, but if you can't make meaningful progress by year 2, that you can kind of just see the door. Like, hey, you're done. And that's not something we've seen, because in college football, with the buyout clauses and all of that, seemingly it's a 3 or 4 or 5 year runway that these coaches get. And now Curt Cignetti is kind of changing that narrative, where it's going to be harder to retain coaches for longer and have a lack of success with the transfer portal. We've seen, I think it's 32% or 35% of all college football players in the transfer portal this offseason. That basically means that no one's safe. Everyone is a fungible asset in some capacity, and that money is going to drive a lot of this. But that being said, Curt Cignetti didn't end up having the largest NIL pool, as it seems, even though that's not all public information. But you're going to have a lot more pressure on these mid-table teams, I should say, around college football to drive success early on. He had double-digit wins in both of his seasons. He's 27-2 now over his first 2 years. That's a magnificent rebound in going from a team that was a bottom feeder for a while to now being national champions. It's a really amazing story, and it's one of the best hires we've seen in sports. It's one of the best stories we've seen in sports. Honestly, I think it's kind of up there with the Leicester City Premier League run, where it's a team that no one else expected to be there, and then, oh my gosh, they climbed the mountaintop and they did it like that. It wasn't a runway. It wasn't like it was coming a decade ago. It was just like you blink and wow, they're here. So it's really, really fun. Congrats to them.
I was literally going to ask you that question. I was going to say, how does this compare to the Leicester City run? Because I understand how monumental that was, but I wasn't paying attention to Indiana in the preseason, so I don't understand how great their rise was. But I was going to ask, like, is this similar to the Leicester City run in terms of like how big of an underdog they were beforehand?
I mean, listen, it's up there, because if you look at the preseason poll, I'm pulling it up right now. Indiana ranked, 20th in the preseason poll, which isn't an unbelievable piece to be able to climb all the way up to the top. But if you look at who they were able to beat on their road, they beat a ton of these schools. They beat Penn State number 2, Ohio State number 3. Oregon twice, number 7. Alabama, number 8. They beat Miami in the national championship, number 10. Like, all of these massive teams, they were able to beat in defiant fashion. Like, it wasn't like these games were super close in a lot of ways. The Miami game was really the only test they had in the playoffs. But just think about that. They went to the Rose Bowl against Alabama. They were favorites, and they beat the crap out of them. That's a crazy piece. Like Leicester City, they had a great run. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they were, and maybe soccer is just a different sport, but they weren't beating down on teams where it was an unbelievable magnitude they were overcoming. Like, they were cardiac kings, rather than Indiana's just been the best team in college football. There's no two ways about it. So to me, that is what's more surprising. It's hard to compare, but Indiana has been by far the best team in college football, and no one would have expected that coming into this year.
I looked up the preseason odds of being a champion. Roughly, Indiana before this year, there was a 1% probability of them being a champion. Leicester City was 0.02. It was 1 in 5,000. So I'm just gonna leave that there. That's like roughly the odds. It just I know how improbable that Leicester City run was, so I was curious to see if the Indiana run stacks up. People are definitely hyping up this Indiana run for how incredible it was. But let's put some respect on the Leicester City title. That was unreal, and it's also never happened in the history of the sport. I don't know too much about college football history, but I don't know, is this kind of one of the more improbable NCAA national championship runs we've ever seen, or is this kind of like, has this happened before?
Not really. Like, it's hard to liken it to another college football championship because of the landscape changing dramatically in the last couple of years. The playoff expands. You now can pay the players with NIL. You now have the transfer portal. Like, these are elements that are changing everything that we knew with college football. But just like year over year, we've never seen a 2-year stretch as impactful as what they've been able to do. And again, like this, I don't think this could have happened a decade ago, just given you couldn't pay players and you couldn't have players transfer the way they did. Like, this is unique to this iteration of college football. That being said, no one else has been able to even come close to replicating this. So they're the champs and they're the best at it for now. Curt Cignetti is a great coach. He seems like an awesome dude, kind of a crazy coach, which is, you need some edge to your crazy coaches for them to be successful. But I'm not sure if we'll see this again. If we do, then maybe it will taint the uniqueness of this championship. Like if we see a bunch of teams kind of come out of the woodwork and then be able to compete, like if next year we see my UMass Minutemen end up competing for a championship, that would be staggering. I don't think we're going to see that. Obviously, Indiana had much more in the way of resources than UMass probably will ever have. But yeah, I mean, it's really like going from worst to first. The only reason why I likened it to Leicester City is just because it's these pieces that are unfathomable. But that's the beauty of college football. It's going to put a lot more coaches on the hot seat, but it's one of the greatest stories that we've seen and probably we will ever see in our lifetime.
A poetic way to end it. Ethan, I thank you for your time. Go Hoosiers, go Pats. We hope to see you guys in the near future. We will be back for sure talking about the Super Bowl, that matchup, and making predictions. Hope that y'all are having a good one. Thanks for watching.